Um, I'm winded like a bitch.
Well, we struck out there.
Spydertrack's unit bearings are way out of my budget.
All right, good morning. It's been a while. Haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks. Been waiting on parts and been trying to get this thing ready for King of the Hammers. So I guess you probably know by now, unfortunately, I'm not going to have this thing ready for King of the Hammers. It's just not going to happen. Too many things happening at once. We've had a bunch of storms here. Could make a bunch of other excuses. We're going to keep moving forward anyway. I was waiting on some unit bearings to come in. I thought I had ordered 4, only 2 came in. That's okay. A little bit easier on my budget anyway. These 2 will get me going for now. Hey, before we get too deep into this video, I gotta throw a quick little commercial in here for my new mock-up transfer case kits. These are ready to go. I've got several in stock. These are a really lightweight 16 gauge tab and slot design. Each kit comes with everything you need to complete your mock-up transfer case. You can just tack them together. I've got a complete video on how to assemble one of these. If you guys are building anything with an Atlas II style transfer case, you know right now they're several months out on shipping their transfer cases. I think they're backlogged 8 months, maybe more. This little mock-up transfer case kit will get you by in the meantime. Dimensionally, it's the same within a 1/4 inch of the Atlas II transfer case. It's got all the features on it, like the shift rail cover in the rear, the standoffs on it that represent the driveline outputs, and you can set up the mock-up transfer case in either a front driver output configuration or a front passenger output configuration. This ring on the front for the transmission input is the same bolt pattern that comes on the Atlas transfer case. You may have to drill these holes out so you can mount it up to your transmission, but this will get you going. You can keep your build going. You've got something to build around, and it's really lightweight and easy to throw around. These are available on the website, tack1fab.com. All right, let's get back to the video.
All right, well, I already ran into a problem. These are Spydertrack's brand outers, interseas and knuckles, and these unit bearings I bought are Trail Gear brand unit bearing. I bought these because I've already got 6 lug wheels. These are the right bolt pattern. They're already bored out to 35 spline, and to be perfectly honest, Spydertrack's unit bearings are way out of my budget right now. These Trail Gear unit bearings are about half the price of the Spydertrack's. But this is what happens when you try to mix and match parts from different manufacturers. These unit bearings are patterned or designed with the same specs on the knuckle side as the 99 to 04 Super Duty unit bearings. The only difference is these unit bearings have a 6 by 5.5 lug pattern, and they're bored out through the center to accept the 35 spline or 1.5 axle. However, the problem that I ran into is that these are the bolts that come with the unit bearings, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you can see that, but I can't get these bolts with the standard hex head in there. They will not work. I'm pretty sure that Spydertrack's either uses a stud or they use a socket cap style bolt. I don't even know what these are called. Socket style bolt like this. Anyway, I can't get these sucked up with the hardware that came with these unit bearings, and I should probably know better, but I just need these unit bearings to be able to move forward with mock-up and to get these lower links set up. But these are the things that you run into when you're building something one-off and you're doing something custom. So here I go. I'm gonna run down to the hardware store and see if I can find some of these type bolts in the right length and the right size.
20 minutes later.
Well, we struck out there. The hardware store didn't have this bolt, but it's a metric bolt, and they didn't have anything that big down there. So that's my local hardware store. If they don't have it there, nobody around here is going to have it. So I'm going to have to source it online. So that's the way it goes sometimes. Plans change. Now we got to pivot. So I think what we're going to do is start working on the back section here. And I'm going to get this rolled tube sort of put in place where I want it. I know these unit bearings will work back here, and I know the hardware I have will bolt right up to the unit bearing cups I have on the back on the rear axle. This might be just a sign that I just need to go ahead and wait and get SpiderTrack's unit bearings. I don't know. I could source these online, get a couple of these the socket cap screws, just so that I could get these sort of bolted up temporarily so I can mock up the front end. Just need to make a decision there and figure out which way I want to go. We'll move forward. We're going to pivot, move to the back end. Here we go. All right, so I got this radius tube. I got the end of it trimmed off. There's a section on the end that's straight. When you're using it in a tubing roller, you have at least 12 inches of straight tube. So I usually leave 24 inches of straight tube on a tube that I roll, just because I don't know whether or not I'm gonna need to trim it all the way back to where it just slides over to the slug, or if I'm gonna need to put a bend in it, one direction or the other. I never really know. It's all, at this point, it's all putting it up on the chassis and eyeballing it and seeing what I like and seeing how the lines flow. So what I got here is I got that trim back, like I said, and I like the way it looks and follows through to the spare tire. This tube up here, I think what I might do, I want to trim this back a little bit so that this bend is closer to the joint. So I'm going to probably do that. I think what I need to do, because of the way these lines are and the way these tubes fall in place, I need to go ahead and get the unit bearing cups tacked in. I need to bolt those unit bearings I just got to the unit bearing cups and bolt the tires on, or at least bolt this one tire on. And I need to flex this suspension out. I need to drop this driver's side down and see how far this tire comes in. I'm pretty sure we're good as far as clearance is concerned. I'm not quite at bump right now. There's quite a bit of distance between the top of the tire and here, but I just want to double check, make sure everything is kind of happy in there before I move forward with this rolled tube section right here and solidifying that. If everything looks good, I'm going to jump to the other side, copy what I've done over here to the other side, and keep moving forward. We'll start tacking tubes together. The other thing I need to do is run a tube on the end of this lower frame mount tail tube. I need to run a tube laterally that way for the sway bar. So I got to do that. I got to get the notcher over here and notch the end of these tubes so I can saddle that sway bar tube in there on the end. All right, here we go. All right, so I got the axle off the stand here I have in the back, and I quickly learned that a couple of my tack welds weren't substantial enough, and I popped a tack weld on this link mount, which I completely forgot about. I just barely tacked them in there just to get things mocked up and in place. What I got going here is I've got the axle on driver's side. I've got it dropped as low as I can. Unfortunately, on the chassis table here, it's going to limit my articulation, but it at least gives me an idea of what things are going to do. I've got probably 5 inches between the upper link here and the cross tube here, and so that doesn't really represent full bump on this side. There's going to be very few situations where this actually articulates that much. However, I want to make sure that I can still do it and clear everything. The big question is going to be, there's a couple of questions. There is a question of the shock. So I know I can go upward a little bit more, or quite a bit more in theory, before I hit full bump on this side. I can't do that right now because if I want to go up on this side, it's going to want to push the axle down on that side, and it's limiting me because of the chassis table. So once this thing gets off the chassis table, that's when we finalize this link geometry and articulate everything and make sure it's good to go. The other couple of questions, actually the couple of things I wanted to talk about were the shock. There's a window in here for that shock, and remember that spring, if I set it up for 3.0s, that spring outside diameter is like 5 1/4. So I want to throw the shock in here real quick and see how close we are to this rail in relation to the shock mount. And the other thing is I'm noticing some rear steer. So we got the tires kind of pointing that direction, which in some cases that's unavoidable, but that's a thing with geometry on the forelink in the rear, is that rear steer at articulation. It's something to think about. You know, your forelink is going to have some rear steer in it when you're fully flexed out, and there's ways to mitigate that, but again, you're going to have a little bit regardless of what you do. So next thing I think of what I want to do is throw that shock back in here. My back doesn't really want me to, but I'm going to, and I just want to kind of look at things and visualize where that shock spring would be in relation to that frame mount, or that frame tube, and sort of visualize where that front or the upper mount for that shock's going to be. So here we go. All right, well, shock's in. That was a shit show trying to get that thing in there. I tell you, I need a gantry crane just for these shocks. They're friggin' massive and awkward as hell to move around, especially with that big old remote reservoir and hose on there. But I'm winded like a bitch. Anyway, so got it in there, and I think we're good. I mean, there's plenty of room all the way around the shock body. I've got plenty of daylight, and so the slider here represents about the size of the spring. The spring's just slightly bigger than the slider, I believe. Plenty of daylight between the frame rail and the tire. I think we're good to go as far as that's concerned. So I think we're on the right track here. I wanted to flex this out just a little bit, or as much as I could, on the chassis table, just to visualize and make sure this tube line up here, like I said, is going to work. Now I got to undo everything I just did, get the axle back on stands, and start working on this tube. Copy it over the other side, get this tube lined out the way I want it, and start tying in this back end. So here we go. All right, so I addressed this, I guess this would be C-pillar, D-pillar, depending on what you count the A-pillar support as. So I addressed this tube here, and I think, just standing back here in the garage, I can't really, or in the shop, I can't really get a real good far back visual of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave that tube long. My inclination is to have that bent down more and come down this way, more in here. But that swept back looks really good with the spare tire the way it is. And so I filled in some preliminary, maybe tube work in here with the blue tape. I think that's gonna be good enough to get it sort of mocked up, tacked up. Everything we're doing is only tacking it in place. When I can move on to the front end. After I get that front end mocked up, then we can get this thing off the chassis table and really start flexing it out and checking clearances and everything. So, all right, here we go. All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up for the day. So in the video, you probably saw I got this tail tube coped and installed where the sway bar will go. I got these two fender tubes or body line tubes, these rolled tubes trimmed and equaled up. I got these C-pillars done. They're cut to length and they match each other passenger to right or passenger to driver's side. I've got this thing sort of mocked up in here. This is where there's a lot of standing back and just looking at things and seeing if it's visually appealing to the eye and if it's meeting sort of what the picture you had in mind was. You can kind of see the body line here, the rolled tube. Got the front end tube in there, just kind of laying there in place. It looks really cool. I'm really happy with the way it's turning out. Putting a tire on there and everything sure makes a huge difference. So this is sort of what I'm thinking about for the tube structure in the back. You got a tube coming off with this end tube that'll come up to there, and that'll be the termination point for this rolled fender tube or body tube. Then you'll have another tube going up and continuing sort of this C-pillar all the way down to that node, and then a tube going from here underneath where the C-pillar kind of terminates and continues through to the bend here on the frame rail. So I'm really happy with it. It will this tube here is going to roll down just a little bit to give me a little bit of clearance by this tire, just in case there's a true 40 that needs to be put in here, which would be another 1/2 inch wider. So I'm just going to give this a little bit more clearance, but I'm really happy with the way it looks. The body lines look awesome. I think this is going to really come out and turn out really nice. Everything flows. Everything looks like it's supposed to be there, and I'm excited to continue this. But these things take a lot of time. These copes on these tubes right in here are going to be fun because of this rolled tube. Anytime you got to notch into a rolled tube or notch into a bend, it's fun. It's a challenge, and I like it. So I'm excited to get going on that, but I'm going to have to wrap it up for the day. Didn't start as planned. I wanted to work on the front end, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and get on the website. Buy a hoodie or buy a hat or buy one of these mock-up transfer cases. All right? We'll see you guys next time.